So now we need to be able to name the parent function given an equation and identify the types of transformations that are taking place. So above you'll see the 5 parent functions we've been talking about. Linear, so when we are thinking about the equation, we will just see x, no exponent, no symbols. Absolute value, we'll see absolute value of x. Quadratic, we'll see an exponent of 2. Cubic, we will have an exponent of 3. And square root, we will have the square root symbol. So that gives away which type of function it is. So if we look at number 1. If I look, what gives this one away is the exponent of 2, so that tells me that it's quadratic. And if we think about quadratic, if we get in the habit of identifying the shape it will make, it will help below once we start graphing. So our parent function is just x squared. We need to identify the transformations that are taking place, and we will just go from left to right. So if I look first on the left, I see this 3, so it's being multiplied times 3. Remember, whatever is multiplied out in front, that stretches or shrinks our graph. So since it's bigger than 1, we're going to have a vertical stretch by a factor of 3. Then keep going to the right. So next up, inside, I see this -7. Inside moves it left or right, opposite of what we think. So this one is actually going to move it to the right 7 units. So we're going to shift right 7 units. Then lastly, we do whatever's at the end. In this case, there's a -1 at the end. This at the end moves it up or down. Exactly what we think. So this -1 at the end is going to shift it down 1 unit. So that's all that we're trying to do in this part, is just be able to identify the parent function and transformations taking place. So look at number 2. I'm trying to identify the parent function. I see x, but there's no symbol, no exponent. So this is a linear function. This isn't actually slope-intercept form, mx plus b. We know that linear is going to make a straight line. So we need to identify the transformations taking place. And we'll go from left to right. So if we look first, out in front, there's this negative. And we see this 4. These are going to do 2 separate things. So whenever I see that negative multiplied out in front, that's automatically going to reflect it over the x-axis. Then that 4 is going to do a separate thing to our graph. It's multiplied out in front. So again, if something is multiplied out in front, it's going to stretch or shrink it. So the negative simply tells us it's going to reflect over the x-axis. Then we take a look at the 4. Since it's bigger than 1, again, we're going to have a vertical stretch by a factor of 4. Lastly, at the end, we will notice this +5. It is not inside parentheses, it's at the end by itself, so that's going to shift it up or down, exactly what we think. So we'll shift it up 5 units. And there's all of our transformations. Go ahead and pause this and see if you can give number 3 a try, and then see how we did. Okay, if we look at number 3, there's this square root symbol, so that's why it's the square root parent function. Get used to this shape. It stops at one spot, goes forever in one direction. So I look left to right. Starting out front, there's this 1/2 being multiplied out front. This is less than 1, so that's going to make it vertically shrink by a factor of 1/2. Then we look inside. There's +3 inside underneath with x. So that's going to shift it left to right, opposite of what we think. It's going to shift left 3 units. And lastly at the end is -2. That's going to shift it down 2 units. Again, pause it, see if you can try number 4, 5, and 6, and I will talk through those 3 examples as well. Okay, we take a look at number 4. It's absolute value parent function because it has the absolute value signs. Then if we work our way from left to right with the transformations, there's a negative out in front, so that's going to reflect it over the x-axis. Inside is -1, so it's going to shift it right 1 unit. Remember, opposite of what we think. Way to remember it, whatever's with x is going to move it left to right. Then on the outside is -4, so it's going to shift it down 4 units. Number 5 has an exponent of 3, so that tells us it's the cubic function. Out front is 2/3. It's being multiplied, so it's less than 1. It's going to have a vertical shrink by a factor of 2/3. Inside is +5, so it's going to go opposite, shift left 5 units. On the outside at the end is +8, so that's going to shift it up 8 units. Lastly, number 6, there's an exponent of 2, so it's going to be the quadratic function. in front is a negative, two different things, negative and a 2. Negative is going to reflect over the x-axis. That 2 that's being multiplied is going to cause a vertical stretch by a factor of 2. And lastly, the minus 3 inside is going to shift it right 3 units. So again, be careful when there's a negative and a number out front, it's going to do 2 separate things. Apply the negative first, reflect it, stretch it, depending on if it's bigger than 1 or if that number is between 0 and 1, we will shrink it instead.